Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Let's Cakap-Cakap. Today is the finale of Spooktober,
Final Halloween special.
Final Halloween special. And we're going to talk about the one country that has exported more horror than any other country on the planet, and the one that's basically started the whole horror genre and film in the first place.
Yeah, they made it an industry.
The American horror movies, right? And we're gonna go over like all the classic stuff, and then and then go through some eras, and then plus the impact that it has today. Because American horror casts a very long shadow, especially all the characters that it has made. So let's go back in time a bit and start from the Universal classics. And these classics are all based off of pre-existing folklore and myth. You had Dracula, you had the Mummy, the Wolfman, and Frankenstein, and the Gill-Man.
The creature from the Black Lagoon.
Or the Gill-Man, as it were. And all of them, bar Frankenstein, were based off pre-existing folklore and myth. Dracula, of course, based off of
Vlad the Impaler.
Vlad the Impaler. And the Wolfman is based off werewolf myths and all that, silver bullets. And the Gill-Man is based off of this Amazonian myth, surprisingly enough, of a race of half fishmen. Yeah.
And the Mummy, of course, is Egyptian folklore where you're supposed to preserve the body in the event your soul comes back and you come back up. And
the adaptations of these and the looks of the universal look for these have become very iconic. When you think of Frankenstein, you think of Boris Karloff's Frankenstein. You don't think of anything else. That's the baseline.
I think Universal Studios set the bar and the archetype, as it were, for these horror characters.
I mean, what do you think Dracula wears? Just imagine. You're either traveling to either Lugosi or Christopher Lee.
Which, actually, Christopher Lee is basically Lugosi.
So, yeah. And, these have become icons of their time. These have become long-standing
horror
characters.
icons.
Yes, horror icons.
When you say horror icon, usually you think of the Universal monsters.
When you think of like the classic stuff, And then, afterwards, I think about like 40 years after the Universal classics became cemented in pop culture, Hammer Horror, a British studio company, gave it a try,
And basically they just built on what Universal Studios already established. They made movies about Dracula, several Frankenstein movies, one Wolfman movie, and a couple of Mummy movies.
No Gill-Man.
No Gill-Man, unfortunately.
Even though Gill-Man is based off Amazonian myth, his look is trademarked by Universal. And
I think they churned out the most Dracula movies, which cast the legendary Christopher Lee as Dracula and Peter Cushing as Van Helsing, his arch rival in several of the movies.
Hammer Productions basically, sort of extended the legacy of the Universal monsters, kept them alive in the public consciousness, as it were. Aside the Wolfman, I think the Wolfman so they had like one Wolfman movie in the 60s. But they kept these creatures in the public eye, until they sort of became stale and then
it became formulaic, I think.
Yeah.
You know how many Dracula movies I saw with Count Dracula? I mean, there's like Scars of Dracula, Blood of Dracula, Brides of Dracula.
So in the stable of Hammer Horror, Dracula was the most popular.
Yeah, they just kept churning out Christopher Lee Dracula movies.
Instead of the ensemble as the Universal classics were.
Yes.
After they became too formulaic, there wasn't much you could do with them, after that point. In the 80s, filmmakers and directors and the studios started to experiment.
Yeah, I guess you could call it the Renaissance era.
They started turning more original ideas.
Yeah, where people like Clive Barker and Wes Craven started to, turn the original ideas on their head and start experimenting with new things.
The only two icons you think of when you think of the 80s, what do you think of?
Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees.
Yes, these are the two titans of 80s horror. No matter what other people will say, like the first thing you think of when you think of the 80s horror movies is always these two.
The Friday the 13th franchise and the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise.
There's 12 Friday the 13th movies and 10 Nightmare movies. So compared to their other contemporaries, like say Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw series, or Michael Myers from Halloween, they don't have as much legs as the Jason and Freddy.
When they come close, I think the Halloween movies are actually quite long-legged.
But in terms of like in terms of like mainstream attention, I mean, Jason and Freddy are like the top, in my opinion, of course.
Oh.
Yeah. But the main thing people think about the 80s are all the new characters that came out, I mean, Jason is basically like a remix of Frankenstein, this undead monster that comes to life and just starts wreaking havoc.
Jason evolved into that. He started as a typical slasher, deformed slasher.
It was only until like part 3 or 4 became the undead zombie we know him as today. Yes. And Freddy was as well. He's just based off this concept that people die in their dreams. And Wes Craven was like, I could make a horror movie out of that, but I need a new character because, He
tried to put a reason to why people died mysteriously in their dreams, in their sleep, never woke up.
Like the 80s sort of like pushed the boundary of like, okay, let's start fresh. Let's try something new. And these are what came out, which is very cool. And but over time, of course, with sequels and recycled scripts.
Same with the Hammer Studios. They just kept recycling the whole thing until it became stale.
Yes, until it became like too mainstream. You had Freddy and Jason show up at Arsenio Hall talk shows. So they started to lose the scariness. I mean, they still had an impact. That's why they captured the imagination in the first place. And one thing, the main point of today is actually like, you want to talk about the impact of American horror. I mean, it is the one horror genre, one type of horror that has a really long shadow over all other horror genres, isn't it?
No, I think it made it mainstream, made it recognized worldwide as a genre, the horror genre. But horror stories have existed around the world since the beginning of the human telling stories. Even in Malaysia, I think like P. Ramlee was making horror stories. I think the most famous one is like Orang Minyak.
Oh yeah.
You see that?
The Oil Man, oh yeah.
Yeah. Black and white movie. It's still pretty good.
Yeah. But in terms of the impact today, we can still see like, Frankenstein, Dracula, The Mummy, The Wolfman, not so much The Gill Man, but most of the big 5 of the Universals sort of have like, they always have these reimaginings and remakes that came out like even recently. I think it was Dracula Untold. Dracula Untold, the 2017 Mummy, I, Frankenstein starring Aaron Eckhart, The Wolfman from 2010.
Yeah,
I think we have this in here somewhere. Oh, we don't have it.
Yeah. But it's starting to become formulaic also.
The Gill Man actually had one remake attempt. That was The Shape of Water by Guillermo del Toro.
Oh my goodness. That was a twisted love story, wasn't it?
No, that was based off, Guillermo del Toro wanted to give the Gill Man a happy ending for once. So we're like, okay, let's try to turn into a love story. But yeah, The Shape of Water creature was based off the Gill Man. True story. But one thing is as well is like the influence on pop culture that American horror has had. I mean, you can see people still trying to copy Jason or cosplay as Jason or Freddy every Halloween. That's how, including myself, that's how prevalent these things are, And what do you think the impact of American horror has been in the horror industry? I mean, is it just the characters that that it has that's unique selling point, or is it just the stories they tell, the effects?
I think it's the way they tell the stories that gave a lot of impact, and then it encouraged filmmakers around the world to make horror stories.
Be a bit more creative, isn't it?
Yeah, in the same way lah. I think it established a standard, and around the world people try to achieve that standard. J horror starts to come out,
And that's when the see more original stuff came out as well after like American.
Hong Kong movies tried to make horror also, but it's mostly comedy mixed in there. I don't know why.
Malaysia's tried a bunch of horror stuff as well.
Oh yeah. Oh, the hantu movies.
But like what we're gonna say about the influences that this started it, and it's why horror exists as a genre today. If Frankenstein or Dracula or any of them didn't do very well, you wouldn't see any horror movies come out today. And we have the classics to thank. No matter what you think of the movies, I mean, you see them today, of course they're cheesy, and some of the effects don't hold up. But I do believe that American horror still is the most influential type of horror you can watch. I mean, it's the baseline. and you can jump off of that, but it's the foundation on which all horror is built.
Yes, you can only build on it. You can't take away from it, or you can't even. It's very hard to even try something new. Most people just build on what was already established.
I mean, there was a Frankenstein movie based on Igor, but it still followed the formula of Frankenstein. And there's even until today, there have been attempts to sort of like remake and retry the formulas.
Unfortunately, in the 2000s, they're just remaking what was already been done.
Yes.
But it rarely does as well as the original.
Yeah, but
not as much impact as the original.
But it's sort of a good telling of how popular these are, that studios will try to bank on the popularity.
So popular. Let's try to milk more money off this.
But yes, like again, Jason and Freddy, the most iconic.
Yeah, but neither of these two remakes did too well compared to the originals.
Kind of a shame. But
no sequels. How well you do is based on how many sequels you get. That's a good baseline usually.
Diminishing returns aside.
Yeah. I mean, the original had how many? This was the 10th Friday the 13th movie, Jason X. Alright? And then it culminated in a battle royale between Freddy and Jason. This is how many movies in for both franchises already. And still made a lot of money. Still a fun movie to watch even today.
So that's been our thoughts on American horror. Do you agree with us? Do you think that American horror is sort of the genesis of all horror, or do you think that it's just a bunch of studio stuff? But to me, I still believe that American horror is very influential on pop culture, because Frankenstein, Dracula, I mean, they're staples, So thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next Halloween, where we probably have more stuff planned. But after this, we're gonna move to more normal stuff.
All right. So thanks for joining us on Spooktober on Let's Cakap-Cakap. Bye bye.
Happy Halloween.